Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Your presence here fills me with a lot of hope, and I'm so glad you have chosen to attend this session on countering fake news. Why I'm happy to see all of you in this packed auditorium is because it tells me that within all of us, there is that innate desire to know the truth. No matter how many WhatsApp teachers we get in our phone, we want to get to the crux of the whole affair, and we are not likely to succumb to this sustained misinformation, rather disinformation campaign going on through fake news. We are fortunate here today to have three panelists whose words, written or spoken, have made a dent in busting the myth of fake news. To my left, as all of you would recognize, is Mr. Enram, former editor-in-chief of The Hindu, and one of the strongest voices for justice and truth in our generation. Thank you, Mr. Ram. To his left is Mr. Pratik Sinha, the founder of Alt News, but he is also the gentleman who is responsible for making truth accessible to us all. I owe a personal note of gratitude to Pratik. Back during the time of COVID, when everything was closed, and our electronic media, with due apologies to Vasu over here, most of the channels were going to town about Tablighi Jamaat and how Tablighi Jamaat volunteers were spreading COVID. At that time, Pratik's Alt News held out like a beacon, telling the truth to whosoever would want to know the truth. Today, we would like to know more about the truth from Pratik. And he has come to us at just the right time. Just a few hours after his organization had got the Communal Harmony Award last evening from the Chief Minister here. The award to Alt News yesterday in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, sends a very strong message on the Republic Day of India. I invite all of you to go back a little bit in time and remember what happened on the Independence Day last year, when people responsible for the gang rape of Bilqis in Gujarat and murder of her family members were released. That was one way of sending a message to the society. And yesterday on the Republic Day, we had a far more positive message to the society, courtesy Pratik's. And then obviously we have Sreenivasan Jain. His face is familiar, his voice is familiar, his works are familiar. What is important is he has just come up with a lovely, lively book, well-researched and written in a very simple manner. It is called Love, Jihad and Other Fictions. Now, as a student of contemporary India and history, I know what is love jihad, but it's better that we start with Vasu explaining what are the other fictional tales he has been able to put together in this book brought out by Aleph. Over to you, Vasu.
Thank you so much, Ziya, for that very generous introduction. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Hindu Lit Fest, for inviting me and all of us and giving space to a subject like this. I'm also somewhat embarrassed to be here as a representative of my two other fine co-authors, Supriya Sharma and Mariyam Alavi, both fine journalists, both fine women journalists, in fact, whose presence would have both enriched this conversation and also brought a little more gender diversity to this panel. I mean, it's not as if we aren't diverse, we have different first names, but I think they would have definitely had quite a lot to contribute as well. You know, it's sort of interesting that at this stage of my career, in my so-called golden years, I find myself, along with these co-authors, going down the rabbit hole of WhatsApp forwards and social media posts. But the reason for doing that is in a way fairly obvious. What has happened is that these theories of the kind that we have focused on, which are essentially theories, anti-minority theories, Islamophobic theories mainly, used to largely lurk in the corners of the internet or in the fringes of what could be called the Hindutva ecosystem. If, for example, 10 years ago, I was to author a book on love jihad or some of these other theories like population jihad, which makes the claim that Muslims have a conspiracy to overbreed and overtake Hindus, people may either have laughed at us or have been indifferent, saying, we don't necessarily need to read a book to understand that these things are bogus. But today, they are being platformed at the highest level by elected representatives, by chief ministers, by MPs, by MLAs, by cabinet ministers. Take, for example, something that we've tackled in our introduction of the book, where there's a WhatsApp forward that claims that in the movie Sholay, there is electricity that is supplied in the fictional village of Ramgarh. There is electricity that is supplied to the Muslim area for namaz, while in the Hindu area, poor Thakur has to wander around with a laltain, a lantern, because there's no electricity. Now, you would ordinarily dismiss this as farcical. Cut to 2019, Yogi Adityanath, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, is actually making this statement from an election platform, where he says that more electricity was supplied under the previous Samajwadi Party government to the Muslims on Eid compared to Diwali. So we've actually had to respond to it, and we've had to fact check it, and we've crunched a decade of electricity data in the book to come up with a very fascinating response to that, for which, you can buy the book to know what we found. But I think that's been the dramatic shift that we are witnessing, where today's WhatsApp forward is tomorrow's law. There are actual laws that have been passed, so-called love jihad laws, by a number of state governments, which essentially seek to criminalize interfaith relations on the bogus premise that there's a Muslim conspiracy to seduce and convert Hindu women with a view to altering India's demographic status. There are a number of laws that have been passed to essentially criminalize all conversions on the premise that there is a Christian conspiracy, a similar conspiracy by Christians who constitute barely 2% of the population, to overwhelm over 1 billion Hindus. Many of these laws go back to decades, but the laws have been further strengthened by state governments, especially in the past decade, and their reach continues to expand. There are also laws, as we know, that are being passed or are being mulled to place restrictions on population, again on the basis of this idea that there's some kind of population jihad which is afoot. The net result of this kind of high-level platforming is that these toxic falsehoods have flooded our personal ecosystem. We are now not just battling this as journalists, but in WhatsApp groups, in social media posts and so on, we find ourselves battling our friends, our family, our relatives. This is poisoning the common well. It's also having real-world consequences, especially for India's minorities, which I won't bother to list here, but it's worth recalling, because this is something we tend to forget, that one of the most consequential riots of the past decade, the Muzaffarnagar riots in 2013, where over 60 people were killed, actually originated with the germ of the bogus claim that there was a love jihad incident, that there was a clash between Muslims and Hindus in which 2 Hindu men killed a Muslim boy, and the Muslim retaliated and killed the 2 Hindu boys. And the allegation was that there was chhed-chhad. The Muslim boy had sort of harassed a Hindu girl, and these boys had gone to avenge her honor. The reality was quite different, but it was fanned and exaggerated, including by the BJP and by the Sangh Parivar, into a full-fledged riot. So that, in a way, was the beginning of the mainstreaming of these theories. And so our idea was to, because we were dealing with this as journalists all the time. On my shows I would do on NDTV, Supriya and her journalism, and so on. So our idea was that let's try to put these together in a book form, so that you have a kind of handy guide that tomorrow, if you're in a fierce WhatsApp fight with, let's say, an angry uncle somewhere who's saying, but Manmohan Singh promised all the resources of this country to Muslims. Or what about Aftab Shraddha? Isn't that an example of love jihad? Then, you'll have something which you can to counter or to share with them. The other, and this is my last point before I end, the other kind of motivating factor, Zafar, and you would appreciate this as a journalist, is that there is a great deal of frustration we all felt with how the media would approach this. I mean, the media, quite apart from amplifying these theories, continues to treat them in a kind of he said, she said way. This is the great curse of our time, the debate culture. Is it love jihad or is it not? Is there a Christian conspiracy? These are all easily verifiable, well, not that easily, but some of them are verifiable facts that you can establish through the hard tools of reportage and evidence gathering are certifiably false or are exaggerated. So just to finish, so the idea was that we snap out of this notion that everything is sort of up for debate and everything is kind of amorphous, and to say quite clinchingly that at least these theories are, and when I say false, there's a spectrum. Something like Muslim appeasement has a kernel of truth sometimes. There are, for example, governments that have passed schemes that are beneficial to Muslims. But to claim from that all resources are being diverted is simply not true. So the idea was also to intervene in the media conversation to say, for heaven's sake, stop trying to create, gray areas when actually you can clinchingly come out and label some of these as fictions.
Thanks a lot, Vasu. We can debate about Muslim appeasement and love jihad, but what is the reality of our times is we are living in an era of sustained, willful disinformation. A little bit before you, a few years before you, Pratik had done the book on the same lines, except that he didn't call it disinformed, he called it Misinformed India. Could you throw a light how it came about and how different is it from what we are seeing today?
So that book was actually almost 5 years ago, so a lot has changed since then. Lot has changed in also the way information is being put out as to how every pillar of the information landscape has now been captured. That was not so 5 years ago. Right now, if you look at whether it is OTT, whether it is media, whether it is social media and what is happening on social media, whether it is newspapers, so any form of information which contributes to the information landscape is either captured or controlled. Even something like WhatsApp, which does not have an algorithm, it is captured purely by money muscle, that you put so many people there that you then control what is going on WhatsApp. So I think since this book came out just before 2019 election, if I'm not wrong, and since then there has been, back then at least there was some amount of criticality in the information ecosystem. Right now there is a complete attempt to just weed out all criticality in the information ecosystem. So that is definitely one big change. But along with that, I think we have, many of us have also understood what is causing this issue. Why is that, if I don't think there'll be one person in this room who hasn't fallen for disinformation, misinformation. Yeah.
People are very willing and gullible consumers of disinformation.
We don't know willing or not, right? We don't know willing or not. When something comes on a WhatsApp forward, how do we define what is willing and what is not? So, and that is the question that, why is that the act of falling for disinformation is universal? It is not just something which is limited to India. It is not something which is limited to the developing world. We saw what happened in the US after the election. So the act of an individual falling for disinformation is universal. And I think there's a little more thought that has to be put into that I think this realization has actually come after doing 7 years of alt news, that actually what we have been attempting to do is appeal to the cognitive side of the brain. That is, look, this is something that is happening and this is logic and you should believe me. But I think that is where, I'm not saying that that is not important. It is very important, but that is only a very, very small part of the puzzle.
See, what you are essentially saying is every one of us should act like a responsible journalist. Whatever information we get, we try to cross-check it before sending the WhatsApp message or anything forward.
What I'm attempting to say is that, why is that we are in this place? I just want to sort of, what I have understood over the past 7 years as to why all of us are falling for disinformation. And I think what we are experiencing is someone doing a play on our emotions, which is happening every single day. Let's say the emotion that is fear, okay? You mentioned the Tablighi Jamaat thing. At that point of time, one particular media channel, they put the figures of how many people had COVID, and the representative image was a man with a skull cap.
With a skull cap.
Right? So now, what does that do? That creates fear in the society. Now, originally, fear as an emotion, let's say if we were staying in a forest, then we want to be fearful because if there's a carnivorous animal, then that emotion, fear, was very important. From evolution point of view, that emotion, fear, was very important. But now we are using that same emotion and we are sort of weaponizing that emotion so that we're not now fearful of a carnivorous animal, but we are fearful of a fellow human.
Yeah.
And so to your question as to do all of us have to be journalists, I think what that entails is, what it entails is that this base emotion that is fear, if people in politics, or even people who are doing email scams, there are so many elderly people who are falling for sort of this, they're losing money every single day because someone's calling them and telling them that, something has happened, your electricity is going to be cut off, you pay right now, you give OTP, and you give the OTP, and then suddenly there's 60,000 rupees which have gone from your bank account. So someone's playing on your emotion.
On your emotions, all that.
And unless we create a shield for ourselves, which is...
And I guess for that shield you have the alt news?
Pardon?
For that shield you have the alt news.
No, I don't think that is what I'm saying, that the realization after 7 years is that alt news is not a shield. Because there we are only talking about cognition, that, look, this is reason. And I don't think reason works when it comes to something you're fearful of. Imagine anything that you're fearful of. And even if you're given reason, I don't think you stop being fearful of that. So I think there's something else that needs to be done, which is a shield for, we are all emotional beings, that is not going to cease. But there has to be an educational, at least I think I have more hope in education, where there has to be something that creates a shield where whatever we are at the core, that is emotional beings, and that which is being abused, we have a shield to protect ourselves from that.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Mr. Ram, how do you think, as the editor-in-chief in the past, and as one of the senior most journalists, how do you think, as the editor-in-chief of the Hindu in the past, and one of the most respected senior journalists in the country, a print media journalist can play his role in countering this avalanche of fake news?
Yeah, there are two aspects to the challenge. One is to safeguard your own media organization, your journalism from the invasion of disinformation and misinformation. That's relatively easy compared with the other aspect of the other challenge, because you can set standards. For example, photographs. You must know the source, either your photographers or photographs that are verified by your photographers, vouched for by your photographers, for example, or videos for that matter. Don't take it from Twitter. So these are standards, and we've had it in the Hindu for several years. Similarly, we compared notes with the Financial Times. They have similar standards, and so you don't easily get stung. You can't claim we've never been stung, but it's not easy. Compared with those who just take any image or any information and so on. That's one. But what do you do about the disinformation out there? You are a small player compared with the Meta or Google or even Twitter, because the scale is entirely different. So is it your task to go out there and combat heroically all the disinformation, or at least the most harmful kinds of disinformation out there? And that's a huge challenge, and in that respect, Alt News, its main founder, Pratik Sinha, and also Mohammed Zubair, you referred to the very fitting award that he's got from the Tamil Nadu government. I compliment the recipient as well as those who gave this award for communal harmony, specifically, as the Hindu reports today.
Could you say something about that particular video which Alt News had aired at that time about migrant laborers?
Yes, that's in the report today, and you can get more details from Alt News. But this so-called video of a so-called purported attack on migrants in Tamil Nadu was weaponized, or sought to be weaponized, and Alt News, which is a relatively small player with a very modest number of workers, did a magnificent job in putting it out. And then you can scale it up there. And I think it is for that, for averting further harm from a very potentially volatile situation, that this award has been given. It couldn't have been given to anyone more fitting than Mohammed Zubair, who comes from Tamil Nadu. Perhaps it could have been shared by the two, but then it's an award for somebody here. And we are proud of that. So Pratik and Zubair are heroes of mine, I could say. And I've said it before, they are world class. Alt News is one of the world's most valuable. It's more than a fact check website, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
They do investigative work. He has, technically they are very good. There are engineering solutions that they have worked on. I can talk about it later if there's time. But also I want to say, I'm not just handing over compliments, but I think in this connection, excellent book. This excellent investigative journalism by Sreenivasan Jain, Mariyam, Alavi, and Supriya Sharma joined forces with them. And in fact, there are two women against one in this, so you can be proud of that. But it's, they've looked at, I've read the book closely. They've looked at love jihad, population jihad, forced conversions, Muslim appeasement, and I think they've done a very careful bit of investigative work. This is field reporting as well as analysis of data journalism. And really, this is the way to go. So you can join forces with Pratik's Alt News. There are one or two other websites.
Yes,
but nothing as good as Alt News, in my opinion. They are also involved in West Bengal in media education, or what's called media literacy, that you go to schools and they're doing a pilot, going to schools and develop a curriculum. This is part of an international project, the Trusted News Initiative that I'm involved with, sponsored by the BBC, been going on for several years. So I think that's the other part of it. So, but if you give me one more minute, I just want to make it clear that as media practitioners or as people who work with tech, because we have to get together on that, we must make a clear and actionable distinction between disinformation and misinformation. That was your first question to Pratik. He said that was 5 years ago. But today, you have to make that distinction because disinformation is deliberate, it's motivated, and it's scaled up and weaponized on the social media platforms, the search platforms, the messaging platforms like WhatsApp, and the social networking platforms. India is one of the countries most affected by toxic disinformation.
Yeah, we are number one in the world in fake news.
Yes, and misinformation, which we all do, or are all been victims of, because given the deadlines and the kind of things that come at you, you make mistakes. Misinformation can also be harmful, but it is not intentional, it is not deliberate, and is typically a result of reporting or editing failure, so far as the media are concerned, and this can be easily corrected. There are various mechanisms to do it. A news ombudsman, having codes of practice and so on, that's relatively easy to tackle. It's not the hard problem that disinformation is. And on the scale, Facebook, they don't put out authoritative data all the time. There are other sites, and India has at least 315 million Facebook users.
Yeah.
The number one in the world. WhatsApp, by far the number one in the world, 487 million. These figures have to be verified because they're found on the internet. Sometimes Facebook puts them up, but they don't own this data. And of course, Instagram, again, India tops the list. So far as Twitter is concerned, it's more limited. India is not the largest user in the world. The United States is, followed by Japan. And there are some problems with the numbers which Pratik and others can sort out, because I have the figure of less than about 28 million.
Okay.
But if you look at what Forbes India has put out on the top 10 in the world, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has something like 95 million.
Yes, yes.
So you got to reconcile.
But how many of them are genuine?
Because we know that there are bots and huge inflation on these platforms, so we need not exaggerate them.
Yeah.
But
what is important is with such great number of users in India's social media, various tools, whether it is Facebook or Insta or Twitter, the damage is also as grave as profound. And that is why it is important, the critical to counter that.
But
Vasu probably would like to say something in that.
No, so I think, it's something that I think we should keep in mind, that when we talk about countering it and what sort of role we can play, because most of us here are, in a sense, practitioners of journalism in some form or the other. Fact-checking of the kind which Pratik and others do is now become a legitimate form of journalism, and he's been deservedly praised by everyone on this panel for him and other fact-checkers who have brought in a new grammar into newsrooms. But the thing to remember is that when we talk about these falsehoods and we talk about India becoming a Vishwaguru in fake news, this is not happening by accident.
Yeah.
This is happening by design. And as I said at the outset, it is largely because this is politically driven falsehoods. This is being done with a clear agenda to divide society and for political gain, largely by the current ruling establishment. So let's just address that fair and square and not sort of try to couch it in a generic sense, because then you'll never be able to solve the problem until you first identify the problem. Now, if this is a political problem, the solution has to be political. As journalists, we can't fight a political party, you can't fight a government, you can't fight the huge bot armies they can command. What we can do is to try and respond using the tools of journalism in a way that people feel we're not coming with agendas. And that's
like what you have done in your book.
And that's something we were very conscious of, that we didn't want to, because it's immediately evident when you write a book like this, it's like, oh, it's Sreenivasan Jain, it's Love Jihad, but if you read it, it's quite easy to take a condescending view of some of these theories and say this is total bogus.
Vasu, one does book as a matter of countering that propaganda.
Yes.
But
So,
the thing is, by the time any book comes, not just yours or Pratik's,
Yes.
any book comes, the damage is done in the society. The common man would have consumed all the WhatsApp messages, videos, and taken them to be the truth.
so the thing is that, of course, the damage is done, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a role to try to push back, right?
Yeah.
So, if there are 1,000 lies being told, we can at least tell 10 truths. We can't, I mean, frankly, professionally, we don't have a choice because that's our job. But what I was trying to say is that it's important that when we frame the argument, we do it in a manner which appears to readers to convince them that this is being done purely on facts, which is why we approached all the conventional methods of journalism. When we tackle these theories, we filed RTIs, we did good old-fashioned shoe leather reporting, we looked at government records, we went through parliamentary answers, and so hopefully when people read it, and this is also true of the approach that, for example, Alt News and other fact-checking sites take, that you take a kind of dispassionate view, and you take a theory, and then you dissect it, and then you present it, and then that hopefully has its own persuasive power. But ultimately, there has to be, for a political phenomenon, there has to be a political or a public accountability. The people have to look at what's going on and say, listen, this is dangerous. You can't have elected representatives lying through their teeth and let them get away with it.
Thanks, Vasu. Pratik, I have a
I want to
question
add
on
one
this.
thing to this. I want to add one thing as to why this book is important. So you said that, oh, the lie has already spread. But here there is an innate assumption that we are going to be able to fix this issue in this generation. I think that is a false,
Yeah, it's for documentation that way.
false assumption. Why a book like this is important is also because it is to document our times. And I think that is also where I see some value in alt news work, is that we are documenting our times. But if we assume that, oh, we are going to write something or we're going to do some journalistic work, and that is going to solve the present issue. And I would like to add one thing, that I don't think it is only a political issue. It is, I think the issue of disinformation is many, many layered. So for example, on a WhatsApp group, if somebody elderly puts out some information, then someone younger can't say that this is wrong. So it is also a cultural issue.
Yeah, socio-cultural issue.
It is the issue of misinformation sort of
But
propagating.
Pratik, on this subject, isn't this fake news thing largely a right-wing tool in our country?
Say that again?
This fake news propaganda, isn't this a right-wing tool?
Yes,
Largely.
they are doing it the most. I completely agree that the present ruling dispensation is doing it the most. But then, but that is not the only fakery that is going on. During COVID, we saw so much disinformation, right?
Yes.
That was not political disinformation. So I'm saying that there is also an underlying societal issue that we are seeing where it is multi-layered. Yes, there is someone who's weaponizing this, whatever this vulnerability, etc. And BJP is doing that the most. But there's disinformation from other parties. So I'm saying that there's also something which is underlying, which we need to look at and deal with.
Mr. Ram, I would like to come to you for that. Considering what Vasu said, do you think it's just the right time for practically every news organization to have its own version of alt news before going to press or to air the news?
See, the problem is some news organizations consciously do propaganda.
Yes.
And it.
For the actual news organizations, not propagandists.
I'm not naming anyone, but you can see it on television especially. But some of it merges with disinformation.
But that's all
Although,
deliberate.
Not everybody will do it, but many who are serious, professional, will do it. And the important thing here is, as I think Pratik has said it earlier, you have to do it for everyone consistently. If the Congress party does it, you got to call them out. A fact-check unit or an investigative unit has to do it, has to be even-handed and do it. But back to the question of whether it's political, yes, in India, I think we have a real problem that the right wing does it more than anyone else because they are in power in many states. Top people do it. I don't want to name names. Governors do it. several states. Leaders of political parties do it in several states. They consciously put, either they do it themselves or they share things. This and this, I don't want to name names here.
Not everybody needs to be named.
But
We should have no qualms in naming names, by the way.
But again, just to take these examples from alt news, misleading during the pandemic, misleading video claiming dry ginger can cure Omicron is scientifically baseless. That's a headline. So it's not just politicians who do it. The child theft rumors, a sordid saga unfolds as police look for effective measures. Fact check, again from alt news. Burqa-clad woman on DTC bus in viral clip is not a child kidnapper. She could have been lynched if that had got around. They quickly intervened,
Yes.
and I think it helped save lives. Fake messages claiming child kidnapping cases on the rise in Mumbai, again exposed, and so on. And there are other examples around the world.
There are
But
plenty of them.
So just
also cultural.
to clarify, obviously, disinformation, etc., is coming from multiple sources, and there's no question about that. What I was simply saying is that you don't have, we don't have the luxury of going at least, like when we were writing the book or even as a newsroom, to go after every single piece of disinformation that's out there. You have to focus on the most visible and the most consequential pieces of falsehoods or half-truths, because again, let's be clear, not everything is fake. There are theories, there are claims that are made which have a kernel of truth. For example, when we talk of Muslim fertility.
Muslim appeasement in the book.
Muslim fertility, there are easily available statistics which show you that yes, Muslims do have a higher fertility rate than Hindus. But does that necessarily mean they're going to overtake, over 1 billion Hindus, that 200 million Muslims can overtake 1 billion Hindus in the near future? No. There are enough demographic projections which will tell you that. So it's a whole spectrum. But what I meant to say is that we have to be, at least in our case, we felt like we have to focus on what is, to me and to my fellow authors, the most societally dangerous, divisive theories, and where are they coming from? And of course, all parties do it. But you obviously have to look at where the biggest tap has been turned, and at the moment, we know where that is coming from.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that's important to
without
identify.
naming names, Mr. Rao said it all.
No,
And
but
on
I
that
mean,
note, we'll have to cut the discussion a bit short here because we would like to have a few questions
Before
from
that,
the audiences.
okay,
a bit of authentic news. England 284 for 6. Ollie Pope, brilliant, 128 not out. They're still far behind, but 94 runs ahead.
This is genuine news?
This is authentic. For those interested.
Now I invite a few questions to the panelists. Please do raise your hand and ask questions one by one. Keep yourself brief.
Can they give us 5 minutes more? Beg for it.
Curator, do we have 5 minutes more? Yes, we do.
Now, I just wanted to know, how do this panel really look at Rupert Murdoch and Fox News? I mean, are they journalists? Or have they a greater role than people like me who participate in WhatsApp?
Yes, may I? Yes, we are holier than thou because journalism is a professional pursuit. We don't put down all social media. There are scientists on it. There are good people. There are honest citizens who go out on social media. We're not talking about it. We're talking about that, not even misinformation. Disinformation, where false news, most often toxic news or information is weaponized and scaled up on these platforms. And the technology companies, although they claim to do their due diligence, their verification and all that, are completely not up to the mark. That's what we are talking about here. As for bad media, there are plenty in every country, and we are not really talking about it. We are talking about serious journalism, professional journalism, honest reporters, editors who believe in the independence of the news media, proprietors who allow independent journalism to survive and flourish. They may not in many cases. I think we are talking about that. And in comparison with what's out there, just as you trust doctors when you have a health problem and not quacks, you have to rely largely on curated or professional media.
But
Thank you,
I
Mr.
just
Ram.
want to, I just want to quickly add to that while of course I agree with Mr. Ram that there are honorable exceptions in the media which are maintaining a line of sanity and are remaining within the realm of responsible journalism, sadly, that's a shrinking minority. For the most part, the mainstream media, especially TV news, is actually actively amplifying these sorts of divisive falsehoods and bogus theories on a nightly basis. So it's a perfect kind of storm where between, let's say, social media, political parties, and the mainstream, particularly TV news, where you'll see these theories being ricocheted. Every night a new jihad will be floated. One day it'll be love jihad, the next day it'll be land jihad, the third day, and the Chief Minister of Assam has coined fertilizer jihad. So
Yeah.
there's a kind of jihad the moment, and
He
a
talked
large
of tomato
chunk-
jihad also.
yes, and there's a large chunk of the mainstream media which is an active agent in amplifying this.
The gentleman in front.
All of you on the stage have fought misinformation, disinformation, all those terms. How do you fight business houses that have invested in disinformation, deliberate disinformation, having bought out media houses, bought out print media, and then squeeze those few pockets of honest journalism?
By writing a book.
Yes, concentration of ownership in television in particular, but also in some media markets in India is a serious issue. And when ownership is concentrated, then independence suffers and the quality of journalism suffers. There's no question about it. And buying out independent media, here you have somebody who has actually experienced this and refused to have any truck with it. You could have continued, Vasu, and I'm talking about here NDTV, but he came out and is on his own doing other things. Hats off to people like that.
So,
The young man in front.
yeah, thank you. So,
So he's saying something. He has the mic.
yeah, thank you. Wait for the mic, sir. Wait for the mic.
I will come to you.
Yeah. They got your question, sir. Thank you. So, my two quick questions is, one, we have failed to cultivate a temper of, zero resistance towards fake news in the minds of the people. To me, religion, scriptures are the biggest proponents of fake news, and no media has ever done anything in the history to resist any of that. And if you do not cultivate that temper in the citizens, I mean, any kind of fake news can come up. That's my first point. Second point, your reactions on that. Second is the psychology of human beings. One of the studies says that when you find garbage in a street and there's public apathy, the best thing for you to solve the problem is to add more garbage. That it becomes so intolerable that somebody, all of them collectively have to take action. So to counter fake news, why don't you flood the media with more fake news on the other side? So somebody has to take action at some point.
No,
Thank you.
Pratik has been doing a good job of cleaning all the garbage from social media, and maybe he could take this question.
On the question of religion, yes, I do agree that all religions sort of work on a principle, but it is not very different from what the present disinformation scenario is working on. That is, again, what religion gives to you in terms of, for a lot of people, religion is very important. It gives them some peace of mind, a lot of things. But I think the basic thing, whether it is religious scriptures or what we witnessed on Jan 22nd, and we witnessed an outpouring of emotion, right? And that comes from, I think all of this comes from the same place. So when you're saying why is no one working on religious scriptures, or why is no one working on that kind of criticality, I think all of this work is similar. And it is not that work has not been done on issues of religion, not as much in India, but there's a lot of work that's been done outside India.
So one thing, like whenever we talk about news, for sure we have to mention media, because media
So please
has
take a mic.
Sorry, sir.
Mic.
Oh, sorry. Because, sir, media has a medium, it delivers us the news. So media, to produce that news, it has to be of balanced information. And in order to have a balanced information, media has to be independent. So my question, particularly for Sreenivasan sir, how far today's media is independent? Because recently, if you observe NDTV, like Adani's share, like Adani Group has also got certain share in NDTV. So how far today's media is independent in order to produce a balanced information? Thank you, sir.
I think everyone here pretty much has a fairly clear assessment of how independent Indian media is today. I don't think it really requires me or anyone else to spell it out. There are enough indices, if one is into that, to look at India's position in the Media Freedom Index to see where we are and how much we've fallen and continue to fall every successive year. It's a huge crisis for us who are practitioners of journalism and who are also, in a way, being looked at by younger generations of people who want to enter journalism to sort of look at where is the space or where are the spaces left for independent media. As we know, a lot of those spaces now, the mainstream has largely shrunk. There are a few, of course, honorable islands like the Hindu when it comes to newspapers. In television, I virtually can't think of even a single example. So the action has shifted to digital, as we know. And that's really where you still have some islands of independent reportage and independent media. But even there now, there is an attempt by the ruling regime to try and come in and intervene with its own narratives or to bully and harass and intimidate digital practitioners, as alt news knows very well with what happened to Zubair and to the organization and so many other websites and
But Vasu, whatever
individual
happened to
practitioners.
Zubair,
Even the new law,
the
right?
fight-
The IT rules law, that is.
The new IT rules law, NewsClick, etc., etc. So it's a very challenging time.
Vasu, for all the harassment of Zubair, ultimately he got an award for fighting on. And on that note, we'll have to wind up pledging that we will fight on against fake news. Thank you for being here. And hopefully everybody goes back armed with the power of truth.